everybody. I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission for Wednesday, March 25th, 2026. May I have the roll call, please?
Chair McGill,
Here.
Vice Chair Lesnar-Buxton,
Hugh.
Commissioner Aldana,
Present.
Commissioner Clark, Commissioner Nielsen,
Here.
Commissioner Price, Commissioner Ramsey.
Present.
All right, thank you. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
Okay, thanks. And written public comment, we have two written comments. Both of them are pertaining to an agenda item, the one on Douglas Preserve. One of them you probably got because it came within the 24-hour time limit, and the other you just have the printed copy. You didn't get an email copy, right, because it came in this morning. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, but you do have them both here. All right. That takes us to public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the commission. The total amount of time for public comment will be 15 minutes. I do not have any speaker slips for general public comment. Do we have anybody online?
No, Chair McGill, there's no one online.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, that takes us to the Commissioner Committee assignment reports. I'll start on my left with Commissioner Aldana.
Nothing to report today.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Nielsen.
I attended the Youth Council meeting recently, and they were in final stages to get prepared for the Youth Speak Out, which we will hear during the Director's Report, so I'll save it for that.
Okay, thanks. And Vice Chair Lesnar-Buxton.
Nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ramsey.
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Clark.
I attended the regular meeting of the Street Tree Advisory Committee, and we're going to be discussing all the trees that we visited and talked about during that meeting later in the agenda.
Okay, thanks. And we did have a Park Foundation meeting last week. We progressed our plans for the increasingly exciting summer schedule for the band Shell. And then we also reviewed and approved funding for the 2-year work program for Douglas Preserve that you'll be hearing about later in the agenda. And that takes us to Commission and Staff Communications. Is there anything to report there?
Chair McGill, Commissioners, no, nothing to report.
Okay, thanks. And that brings us to our consent items. The first is the summary of council actions. I'll just get that out. I did not, unless there's any questions or comments, that's for information only. Okay. And then that takes us to the minutes of the last meeting with the recommendation that the commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the regular meeting of February 25th, 2026. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Will somebody second? A second. Thank you. Okay. And we can go to a vote. All right, and that brings us to trees. Wow. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair McGill and Commissioners. The first Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove a large river red gum located within the front setback of the property at 1580 Aramis Road. The applicant listed essentially just one primary driver on the application to support the removal, and that was significant tree branch failure over the life of the tree, the most recent of which landed on the electrical system directly below the tree and took out the power pole, and Edison had to rebuild the whole system. And we actually talked to Edison to make sure that that all happened, and it actually did. So it was a pretty significant event. And despite frequently maintaining the tree. Every couple years, it's been relatively problematic for the homeowner. The committee evaluated the tree and the application. The tree, in terms of health, is in good health. It's a very old, relatively nice-looking river red gum. The committee evaluated just the overall structure of the tree, the electrical system directly below the tree, and sort of the residual or proposed risk that the tree posed, I think, moving forward. Since the most recent event, lots of strategies were looked at, including cutting like the entire side of that tree off as a pruning option. So I think that the committee really explored really any feasible strategy, including like retention, moderate pruning, or really aggressive pruning to manage potential for limb failure. After discussion and review, they ultimately decided that the risk to the electrical system and sort of the burden to the property owner remained high enough that they supported the removal. They discussed mitigation options. If you were able to make a site visit, it's a very lush, full property. And they did discuss the merits of requiring a replacement tree or not requiring a replacement tree. And I think their comments was from like a consistency perspective as it relates to setback tree removal applications, that they did feel necessary for a replacement tree to be planted on the property. And after review, they made a recommendation to approve the removal on the condition that the applicant plant a broadleaf canopy tree that could be 30 to 35 feet in height at maturity, and that the commission could use finding E, that the regard for safety of persons or property dictates removal.
Okay, thank you. And I noted that the applicant also proposed planting a coast live oak. So that's consistent with the recommendation. All right, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Slack? Commissioner Nielsen.
Last meeting, we talked about specifying the canopy in the condition. This time, it's specified with broad-leaved. I'm unfamiliar with why we would specify that and what that really means in the tree world. Could you elaborate, Mr. Slack?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, it's kind of synonymous with canopy. So broadleaf is going to be a canopy tree. It essentially is requiring, I don't know how to say this simply, like a canopy tree. It's like either a conifer, right? So it's like sort of needles, or it's broadleaved. So broadleaved is like sort of a generic term for all trees that aren't conifers. So we just decided to adopt that language and use that moving forward, in addition to providing like the height range that we talked about last month as well, just to kind of shore that up and provide a little bit more clarity. So I think when it's said broadleaved, it's canopy trees implied, and they're essentially synonymous with one another.
Great, thank you for elaborating. And then can you remind me why we wanted to put a range as opposed to just the minimum requirement? It seems by putting a range, we are now just reducing by 5 feet the allowable trees as opposed to being clear whether it's 30 or 35. So maybe there's something I don't understand about how trees are classified. But it seems like we're just lowering the bar from 35 to 30 by putting the range. What's your interpretation of that?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, I think during last month's meeting, it may have been Chair McGill that asked the question about like 30 or 35. And I would probably say that if we had a 30-foot tree and a 35-foot tree, and they were relatively close together, you wouldn't be able to say what height either were. And so rather than have these arbitrary single height ranges or height examples, it made more practical sense to create a range. I think it creates more latitude in species selection too, because as a homeowner, you get the opportunity to select what's going to be replanted on the property. And in reality, that 5 feet isn't a huge change in the overall like shape and character of the tree. So I think you could probably make an argument either way. I think it's a positive step forward to include ranges rather than have one application say, we're approving this tree on the condition that a 30-foot tree be planted and then a 25-foot tree on the very next one, because they're so similar that it just makes sense to include a range.
Yeah, I mean, what happened last month is that we had two applications. One recommended a 30-foot and one recommended a 35-foot, and I basically asked what the difference was besides 5 feet. And that's where the discussion of having a range came from, if I'm remembering that right.
And it sounds like these classifications are not based off of some official reference data that certain species of trees are 30-foot trees versus 35-foot trees. This is all a staff judgment call for what it would meet that criteria.
Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, essentially that's correct. There's a lot of literature that puts everything into like sort of a generalized box, but those, that 35-foot tree at maturity could never get to 35 feet, or it could grow to 50 feet too, because it's, it's nature, it's highly variable. So I think it just is a easy way to kind of benchmark something that is going to be replaced that can offset the loss of the existing tree while still providing latitude for the decision maker, in regards to what species they choose to plant.
Great, thank you, Mr. Slack. And one last question, how the committee arrived at the 30 to 35-foot range for this particular instance with a very, very mature eucalyptus that's much taller than that. My understanding from previous meetings is that canopy trees just usually fall in that range, and if we're aiming for a canopy tree, that's a typical range that we would aim for. Was there any more discussion around the height in this case?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, I think essentially that's pretty accurate. I also think if you were able to visit the property, in terms of scale, a much smaller tree is much more appropriate for the parcel and just the neighborhood as a whole than requiring something that's, an 80-foot tall tree like what's currently on the property.
Thank you.
All right. With that, if there are no other questions, I do not have any speaker slips for this tree. Is there anybody online?
There's no one online.
Okay. With that, then, I am ready to open it up for discussion or a motion as appropriate.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee's recommendation to conditionally approve the removal of the following setback tree at 1580 Oramus Road on the condition that it be replaced with a broad-leaf canopy tree that can achieve a height of 30 to 35 feet, and based on the findings that the safety reasons for personal or property.
I'll second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. If there's no more discussion, we can go to a vote. All right, the motion passes. Just 2 seconds. Those of you in the audience that are here, if you are here to speak on an agenda item, and if you haven't been here before, what we'll need to have is a speaker slip. It's one of these, and you find them in the back, and you just write your name and the agenda item and bring it up to the front so that, and we need to get them before the agenda item starts so that we can get our ducks in a row. So if you're here to speak on an agenda item, we will need a speaker slip for that item. Okay, thanks. Sorry.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the next tree removal application to review is located at 230 San Julian Avenue. The request is to potentially remove a large mature deodar cedar that's located within the front setback of the property. The applicant listed several considerations to support the application, primarily hardscape driven, noting cracks in the walkway leading up to the home, cracks in the steps that also approach towards the home, issues with the gate opening on the side of the property, roots, surface roots, people ingress and egress on the property, roots, and then debris related issues relating to cones and needles and debris in the gutter. The committee evaluated the application. We inspected the tree on site. There was general consensus that of the visible problems, they were all relatively manageable with, mitigation strategies such as, repair of the hardscape and/or root pruning potentially, including pruning. Essentially that was the review. So the hardscape, the damage was minimal, and it could be mitigated through several different options. Pruning can have a dramatic impact on both the properties as it relates to debris and challenges with gutter, et cetera. And after review, the committee made a recommendation to deny the deodar cedar at 230 San Julian Avenue.
Okay, thanks. Questions for Mr. Slack? Okay, I've got just a couple quick ones. I agreed that the hardscape disruption certainly didn't look like some we see in the city. It looked quite minimal. The root pruning itself, what impact would that have on the tree? And would you consider this a healthy specimen? I couldn't really tell by looking at it. It looked kind of, I'm not sure I know what a healthy deodar cedar is supposed to look like.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, good questions. I think the tree, I spoke to the applicant today for a period of time. We talked about the review process and coming to the meeting and that sort of thing. And we talked about some of the stuff that I mentioned in terms of managing the challenges that the tree, poses. She told me that it's probably 65 years old. So it's a pretty old tree. And that would have been my just general assessment from looking at it a couple times in person. There's some very subtle, kind of decline that you can see. And it does look like an older deodar cedar. It's up on the mesa, so there's a lot of salt ocean pressure, so it's not a huge one. If you go around San Roque neighborhood, you'll see these just massive, massive specimens. And so I think it's stunted probably as a result of just the sea salt exposure. And then the root pruning would often be probably pretty minimal and definitely not detrimental in long term. It's always a stressful event, but it wouldn't be considered super detrimental. And it could be done very precisely with excavating specifically, within a very small area where those hardscape disruptions are present. You try to isolate that root and then just prune that section out. And that buys you a significant amount of time. And that was part of the conversation I had with the homeowners, that given the age of the tree, the root system's not super aggressive and vigorous, and the growth is very slow. And so doing that probably, you may not have issues or continued damage for significant periods of time. But when you do have cracks and you get rain and the earth starts moving, so, the cracks could get worse even if the root system's not really changing underneath the hardscape, just as a result of all these other factors.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. And of course, we know that debris in and of itself is not considered a criterion for removal. Just kind of comes with trees. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Slack? Commissioner Clark.
A short question. You said the tree is approximately 65 years old. What is a typical lifespan for the species in the kind of environment it's in?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Clark, it's indeterminate. It's definitely not in poor shape where we would expect it to not be there in 5 to 10 years, and we're coming off another really wet year. We're seeing lots of growth out there on all of the trees. So with any luck, it shows a little bit of signs of rebounding as the spring continues to move forward. Spring.
Okay. All right. If there are no other questions, and I don't see any, I do not have any speaker slips. Is there anybody online?
There's no one online.
All right. With that, opening it up for discussion and/or a motion as appropriate. Commissioner Clark.
If there's no discussion, I'm prepared to make a motion to agree with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation to deny the removal of the deodar cedar at 230 San Julian. Avenue.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and I don't see anybody recoiling. If no further discussion, we can go to a vote. Got it. Yeah. All right, and we have that, and that takes us to our last tree item, which is the designation.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the last item for review is just a species designation change, as you mentioned. It's for Pescadero Drive, which is located out in what we call the Hidden Valley neighborhood. Sort of the catalyst for this review was some recent activity that a private tree care contractor has undertaken on behalf of a property owner with some street trees. There's a lot of old purple leaf plums on the street, and it's a short-lived tree, and these trees have kind of cycled out, and they were motivated to remove them and plant something new. In reviewing the existing designation, it was soap bark, which is a neat tree, but it doesn't really produce like a shade canopy. It's very like upright, almost columnar for a really long period of time. And so we decided that it was a good opportunity to look at other tree species that are going to provide more shade on street while functioning within the somewhat narrow parkways that exist out there. So we had a pretty long discussion about what made practical sense, and we ultimately settled on 3 species, kind of building on that biodiversity trend. And after review, the committee made a recommendation to modify the street tree designation for Pescadero Drive to include the eastern redbud, the African tulip tree, and the pearl acacia.
3 very pretty trees. Any questions? How tall do they get? I'm thinking in terms of the canopy, and it seems like the redbud doesn't get that big for sure, or maybe not for sure.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, they're all pretty small trees. The parkways are pretty narrow. I think if it's, you're probably in the 20 to 30 range, like at maturity, but for that neighborhood, I think it's adequate.
Yeah. That would be nice to drive down and see that. Any questions? All right. No slips here, and I assume no slips there. All right. I actually, unless somebody wants to make a motion, I'll go ahead and do it. And I will move that we approve the modification of the trees on all of Pescadero Drive as recommended in the report.
I'll second.
Okay. All right, and that is approved. And thank you, and we'll see you next month. And that
Chair
takes
McGill.
us to the director's report.
I'd like to recommend that the commission take the director's report after item 6. We have guest speakers for item 5. If that's okay, I should have suggested that and changes to the agenda and neglected to think it through.
Okay, so we will take it, we'll take the director's report as the last item before adjournment.
Correct.
Yep. Assuming it's okay with everybody else, that's fine with me.
Okay, thank you. And we have Melissa Hetrick and Timmy Bolton. You have met them before. They're back to give you an update on the work that they're doing related to the Waterfront adaptation plan and get some feedback from you.
Thank you, and welcome back. It didn't seem like that long ago that you were here.
Honorable Chair and members of the Commission, thank you for the opportunity to present on our Waterfront Adaptation Plan. My name is Timmy Bolton, Senior Climate Adaptation Analyst and Project Manager for this work effort. Joined here today by Melissa Hetrick, Adaptation and Resilience Program Manager, as well as Michael Wells, Climate Adaptation Analyst, and Jill Zachary, Parks and Recreation Director, and Jasmine LeBlanc, Assistant Parks and Recreation Director, who are core members of our project team. We're unique as a city in that we have a dedicated adaptation and resilience program with 3 full-time staff whose purpose is to work collaboratively throughout the city organization to help our community prepare for current and future climate-related hazards like sea level rise, flooding, erosion, and wildfire. We're actively working on several major projects shown on this slide, which include a regional coastal monitoring project with our partners at Beacon, preparing our water and wastewater infrastructure for all climate hazards, addressing flooding from rain in the Laguna watershed, and supporting an adaptation project at the airport. Our other current major project is the Waterfront Adaptation Plan, which is funded by the California Coastal Commission, the California Coastal Conservancy, as well as the city. My presentation today will start with an overview of our current and future coastal hazards. I'll then run through the toolbox of potential solutions and some ideas we have on how to improve the waterfront experience for all of our users, and then spend the bulk of the presentation on some potential design options that we're considering carrying forward in the project process to study further in the next project phase. Our guiding light and vision for this work effort is shown on the screen here, which is to develop solutions for coastal flooding and coastal erosion for the next 30 years while enhancing what makes the waterfront special. This is about a 2.5-year work effort, and we're about halfway through it. We've completed an initial community engagement campaign in about February of last year, as well as conducted new technical analysis and modeling to better understand what's at risk today and what's at risk in the future. We're now at the exciting juncture where we're starting to talk about solutions and beginning to sketch out how to address those risks. What you'll see presented today is really a first pass at whittling down the big spectrum of the things that we could do to address these hazards to a suite of options that we're considering carrying forward in the project process to do a technical analysis on to determine timing, feasibility, effectiveness, and cost. I really want to emphasize that we're truly at the very beginning of about a year-long process to consider these options and build towards a recommended solution that will be in front of council about a year from now. Our project area is the 3-mile low-lying coastal area of our city that spans from Ledbetter Beach to the Clark Estate. It's one of the city's most valued public assets, supporting beaches, parks, the working harbor, fishing, tourism, recreation, and transportation, and it truly is a cornerstone of our local economy, with upwards of $100 million in recreational value, and it plays a big part in the county's $7.7 billion blue economy and $2.2 billion South Coast tourism market. Due to its location and low elevation, the waterfront is especially vulnerable to flooding, storms, and erosion. For this project, we're primarily focused on 2 broad categories of hazard impacts. The first is the area where waves are actively crashing and causing damage, and the second is the inland flooding that happens when big waves push that water inland. Today, we face both types of those hazard impacts as shown on the slides here. We've experienced big waves bashing against our shoreline that have damaged our infrastructure. We've experienced undermining and partial collapse of the Harbor West parking lot, as shown in that middle left graphic, as well as flooding and sedimentation in that middle right graphic, where the Ledbetter and Harbor West parking lots got covered in sand. We've also experienced flooding in the harbor commercial area itself, as shown in that far right graphic. At the end of the day, it's not sustainable for us as the city to spend $3 million on cleanup and repair costs from a single large storm like we did in 2023, which is one of the core reasons why we're doing this work effort. As part of this project, we took a deep dive to see how our shoreline has evolved and changed in recent times. And what we found matched our anecdotal experience, which is that East Beach has been eroding significantly. Some sections have eroded up to 5 feet a year since the year 2000. This photo in the middle shows East Beach during a recent king tide event, and what we see is that the ocean water is right up to the ice plant, and in some cases spilled up and over into the bike path, leaving essentially no dry sandy beach area. This is important because not only are we losing recreational access to dry sandy beach along East Beach, but it also means that the right portion of this photo, the inland areas, are far more vulnerable to flooding from the ocean today than certainly they were 20 years ago. Thankfully, there are multiple dynamics along our shoreline, and Ledbetter as well as West Beach were relatively stable to slightly recreational during the same time period of analysis. Looking forward in time, we see that our risk profile will evolve, and with continued sea level rise, these challenges will only grow. Since the year 2000, we've experienced 3 to 4 inches of local sea level rise, and we expect that number to ramp up quite a bit in the coming years, which will create quite the challenge. What this and the following slide show are our future shoreline position if we do nothing. So what I mean by that is the historic erosion trends continue throughout time, and the dredging and those types of dynamics continue. What's new in these graphics is the addition of future sea level rise. So in the green, closest to the ocean, is about 0.8 feet of sea level rise, or the year 2050. The red is 1.6, or about the year 2065. And the blue is 2.5, or about the year 2075. And what we see here is that in Ledbetter, if we do nothing, we've essentially lost the sandy beach in front of the harbor commercial area and a good portion of Ledbetter, although it fares a bit better in front of Shoreline Cafe and the barbecue picnic area. At West Beach, we see that there is some introduced erosion here, but it remains wide and sandy for a long, long time if we do nothing, including well beyond the 30-year focus of this project, which really creates this profound opportunity to re-envision this space and focus on it as a sandy beach destination, especially when we consider the challenges we anticipate seeing at East Beach. As mentioned, we've had this challenging historic erosion condition, and that challenge only grows when we throw in additional sea level rise. So what we found through our analysis is that by about the year 2065, we've lost the sandy beach along most of East Beach. And by about the year 2075, this entire area could erode all the way up to Cabrillo Boulevard, which creates quite the challenge. Diving now into inland flooding risk, these are similar types of maps. It assumes all of our existing infrastructure remains, all of the processes remained, and what's new is sea level rise on top of that. The dark teal represents our current high tide condition. The lighter teal is future high tide with sea level rise, and then these other colors represent different storm conditions. So what's important to note here is that far left graphic, today's condition. During really big coastal storms, we already have inland flooding vulnerabilities, including that extends on the other side of Cabrillo Boulevard. When you add in additional sea level rise on top of that, that challenge only grows and our inland flooding risk only grows. For the purpose of this project, we are primarily focused on the paradigm shown in the left and the middle graphic, while preparing for and keeping an eye on the paradigm and the challenges represented on the right. The point here is really to emphasize, though, that we need some sort of vertical protective measure to prevent ocean water from flooding our inland areas. So I really want to emphasize here, though, that while we certainly have a challenge on our hand, it's truly not all doom and gloom, and we have a toolbox of proven solutions. And as part of this effort, we're exploring that entire toolbox. We're looking at everything from traditional, hard engineered solutions, like seawalls and revetments, to softer and nature-based solutions like beach nourishment, sand berms, and dunes. Each one of these solutions have unique trade-offs and benefits, so it's likely that our eventual plan will have some combination of all the elements represented on this screen to be best suited for the specific areas that they're applied. For instance, seawalls can do a great job of protecting what's directly behind them, but they can also narrow the beaches in front of them. Groins are an effective way to trap sand and widen beaches, but they can also cause downcoast impacts. Our funding partners certainly favor relocating assets, but some things aren't practical to move, like the harbor. I really want to emphasize here that while I know I've talked certainly a lot about coastal hazards, as part of this exercise, we are taking a holistic approach to infrastructure improvements. If we're going to make this massive investment in our waterfront, let's do it in a way that also improves the experience for all of our users. So the ideas represented on this slide here are all things we heard during that initial community engagement campaign. A principal one is that we need a safe way to walk and bike throughout our entire project area. There are some notable gaps in the Ledbetter and West Beach parking lots, so we plan to address that. West Beach has this profound opportunity to really re-envision. Today it's challenged by some stormwater issues. When it rains, the storm drains outfall and pool, which compress the sand. So we plan to address that. There's certainly epic moments along the waterfront, but there's also places that could be more welcoming and more connected. So that's a theme you'll see embedded in some of these options I'll go through in a moment. We've heard clear demand for additional facilities, everything from bathrooms to boat storage, and we're looking for ways to expand economic vitality, revenue generation, and provide more options for our users. And finally, there's a rich recreational heritage along our waterfront. We're looking for opportunities to expand that and build off that heritage. So as we start to talk about solutions, we're really prioritizing those that are multi-benefit. So an example of this is if we're going to provide a new safe way to walk and bike in the Ledbetter and Harbor West parking lot areas, why not do it in a way that also addresses the coastal hazard challenges we've experienced in that same area? So one idea we're exploring that you'll see embedded in this is this idea of a raised walking and biking path that both provides that safe transportation function, but also provides that hazard resilience protection by providing an ultimate backstop when you have big storms and elevated water levels from flooding our inland areas. So taking this all into consideration, we've pulled together a preliminary list of options that are really the starting point for this year-long discussion, building towards an ultimate recommended plan that we plan to do this technical analysis on in the next phase. This all starts with the 4 primary goals and priorities represented on this screen. The first and principal one, it's all about saving our sandy beach, keeping and enhancing sandy beach and recreation for as long as we can. It's about protecting the working commercial harbor in place. It's about providing that inland flood protection to prevent our inland areas from being flooded from the ocean. And it's providing that safe and separated way to walk and bike throughout our entire project area, ideally in combination with that inland flood protection measure. Like all of our projects, our goal is to right size and phase them based on when they're actually needed, based on the ground conditions. For this project, there's really 3 categories of projects that we're considering. The first is the just do it, quick win, low hanging fruit type projects that can largely be done with existing city budgets and would be done immediately after plan adoption. These are things like restriping parking lots, minor drainage improvements, and temporary deployable floodproofing measures. The core measures are really the foundational projects as part of this work effort. They're the things that provide hazard protection for at least the 30-year timeline and focus of this project, are things like this elevated walking and biking path that provide that comprehensive hazard protection. These things we would start permitting immediately after plan adoption. We're also looking at these so-called future options, which are things that often can be more expensive or bigger projects, things that aren't necessarily required for the types of hazards that we anticipate seeing during the next 30 years, but could provide other benefits or could be required later in the century. These could include things that change the physical nature of the coast, like groins and headlands. These are things we would consider permitting mid-century or later. The way we're thinking about how these 3 types of projects come together is that really these quick wins are stopgap measures to address pressing issues today while we work on permitting the core measures, which are really the bread and butter of this work effort and things that will be required regardless of which future options we pursue later. So diving into it, starting first at Ledbetter and then working our way west to each through our project area. Our vision for this space is really to maintain it as a sandy beach and recreation destination. The quick wins here are all about addressing pressing safety and flooding fixes. The safety is really about providing that new way to safely walk and bike. An idea is to take the edge of parking closest to the ocean and edge of pavement area and restripe it similar to what you see in that top left graphic to provide safe and separate space for our users to walk and bike. Also exploring the idea of temporary deployable floodproofing measures in front of Shoreline Cafe as well as the restroom. Seeing if there's an opportunity to have a low curb wall like we have at West Beach, which is shown in that top right photo, to provide a bit of protection for that parking lot. And because there's the potential to impact some existing parking, we're looking at ways to restripe and reconfigure that parking lot to make up any spaces lost by providing that new walking and biking facility. There's some excess right-of-way in the really western portion of this graphic, and so we're looking at capturing that area and providing some additional spaces. The core measure here is really all about this idea of saving the sandy beach by strategically moving things inland to provide space for the shoreline to naturally migrate inland and be sandy over time. So the idea is, can we take area that's currently park and convert that to sandy beach area? Behind that, take area that's currently paved and convert that to a park area. And then behind that would be this potential ultimate backstop of this elevated walking and biking path to provide that protection for our inland areas from high water levels and big storms. When we're talking about strategically moving things inland, I want to emphasize that these things can be done in phases. So for instance, Shoreline Cafe and the restroom could be relocated when we have replacement facilities available, probably in that green area here, or when we reach some sort of defined on-the-ground threshold where it's really not safe to operate anymore. Because there's the potential to impact some coastal access parking by moving things back, we're looking to see, are there ways to provide new parking spaces on the north side of Shoreline Drive, which would be out of hazard areas. So one idea is doing new multi-story parking garages in that area adjacent to Santa Barbara City College. There's also some stormwater challenges in this area, so we're looking at ways to fix drainage there too. The potential future options are really an extension of the strategy of strategic relocation. It's providing more space for the shoreline to naturally migrate inland further for a longer period of time, as well as exploring could the elevated walking and biking path be raised higher to withstand higher water levels and bigger storms? A new idea here is this introduction of a potential headland at the edge of the harbor breakwater, which could potentially widen the beach a bit and provide additional hazard protection. Shifting now to the harbor, where our vision here is to maintain it as a commercial fishing, recreation, and public access destination. The quick wins are similar to that at Ledbetter. It's about addressing pressing safety and flooding fixes, looking at doing temporary deployable floodproofing in strategic locations to protect key assets, doing some minor drainage improvements in the harbor commercial area itself to improve drainage, and then continuing that restriped new safe walking and biking facility in the western area of this graphic. The core measure here are really all about flood protection while prioritizing public access and boating. The big move here is exploring this idea of a raised rock revetment in front of the entire harbor commercial area to provide that flood protection and erosion protection to all of the coastal dependent uses behind it. This could be topped with a pedestrian promenade to improve public access in this area and provide 360 circulation around that core harbor commercial area portion and better connect our users from Ledbetter to the breakwater itself. We're also looking at opportunities to reconfigure and improve the harbor commercial area itself to better support public access and boating, as well as enhancing and strategically raising the walking and biking paths to again provide that safe transportation function and ultimate backstop for big storms and high water levels. We're also looking to see, is there a way to add some new economic development in the harbor main parking lot area? We did a study and found there's some excess capacity from a parking standpoint, so other ways to provide additional facilities there and generate some new revenues to help support these infrastructure improvements. The potential future options are really an extension of flood protection measures, looking at ways to raise the paths and edges higher for, again, higher water levels and bigger storm protection. This is where that potential headland idea is introduced to widen the beach a bit and provide some resilience, as well as marina protection measures themselves, potentially a wave screen, potentially a sand trap at the mouth of the marina. Diving now into West Beach, where the vision is really to reimagine this as a premier sandy beach destination. Because this is a relatively stable beach throughout time, there's only one project category, which is a core measure project, and it's all about achieving that vision. The first thing we need to do to achieve this is to really fix the storm drain challenge. So one idea is to consolidate and relocate those pipes so that we don't have that pooling issue anymore, which could improve the sand quality. To really lean into this idea of folks spending a full sandy day at the beach, that type of experience, looking at ways to add facilities that support that in that orange area in the bottom left, potentially restrooms, showers, a cafe, beach concession, that type of things. As with our other areas, exploring this idea of having that ultimate backstop of the raised walking and biking path with potentially a new adjacent park area that could better bridge the connection from the harbor area itself to lower downtown and State Street, as well as the wharf. Also want to mention in that orange area, looking at ways to retain and maximize and better organize the space for small boats, outriggers, and the tumul storage. Diving now into East Beach, the vision here is quite similar to that at Ledbetter, which is all about a sandy beach and recreation destination. This area is challenged by those erosion conditions I highlighted earlier, but the strategy remains the same. Take area that's currently park, allow that to convert to sandy beach, and then behind that have the elevated walking and biking path to provide that ultimate backstop and protect the inland areas behind it from flooding from the ocean, with the idea of retaining as much of a sandy beach experience for as long as we can. The potential future options are really an additive component to this. There's not much further we can locate things inland if we've already relocated sort of that backstop up to Cabrillo Boulevard. So the question becomes, are there mechanical means to widen the beach to retain that sandy beach experience for longer and provide more hazard protection? So one idea is to explore doing groins, headlands, or offshore reefs to provide that function. The walking and biking path behind it could also be raised higher for bigger storms and higher water levels. And as with our other areas, looking at ways to provide additional parking, potentially by doing a multi-story garage within the existing surface parking lot at the Garden Street lot. We're also just about to launch that Laguna flood resilience study to improve flooding improvements as part of that watershed. So we've reserved some space in the western portion of this graphic for any measures that come out of that work effort. So where do we go from here? We're really focused on community engagement for the next 3 months or so. We're doing a big road show, going to 10 boards and commissions. This is really the very beginning of that outreach. We will be launching a community survey in the mid-April timeframe and then focused on going to community events as well as doing pop-ups along the waterfront. And we'll be hosting 3 open houses, 2 in person and 1 online. We're also doing direct Spanish community engagement via our partners at the Promotores Network. The goal here is that we then this summer work on doing that follow-on technical analysis, and then early 2027 we'll release a public draft plan with a recommended strategy with the goal of returning to City Council with a final plan with their consideration of adoption about a year from now. I realize that was a lot. This is my contact info if you or anyone from the community would like to chat. We also have a great project website with all of these slides and more project information. And to help your discussion today, we have 5 questions shown on the screen here. The first one is, are we headed in the right direction? Are there other options that we should be evaluating in the next project phase? What are we missing? What key questions do you want answered in that next follow-on analysis? And do you have any initial thoughts on timing and phasing? And with that, we're here for any questions you have. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Bolton. It's good to hear the update and see the progress that you are making. I'm going to start with the questions, and then I have a few as well, if they don't get asked before. So I'll start with Commissioner Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton. That was extremely thorough. I'll let you catch your breath for a second. Super excited about this. The walking path on Shoreline is desperately needed. A lot of two-way traffic on kids on bikes going through a parking lot. So would really love to see that fixed. You know, we're talking about other options, and this might seem crazy, but you know, what if we went Dutch and set up you know, some way to remove water? I know that's a crazy opportunity cost of this, but it still kind of seems a little bit relevant. Tell me I'm crazy.
Honorable Chair and Commissioner Ramsey, how would you remove the water? What do you mean by that?
You know, the Dutch drained a bunch of land in order to create farmland back in the 1600s using windmills. Crazy idea, but it is another option that theoretically should be evaluated.
Commissioner Ramsey, Melissa Hetrick, Adaptation and Resilience Manager. So the city does right now have 2 tide gates I'm assuming you mean some kind of like tide gate system. One at Laguna Creek that protects that old El Estero low-lying area, and then one at the bird refuge. So part of the Laguna Resilience Study is looking at how can we increase the resilience of that tide gate system and the grid behind it. Anytime you put up a wall, you have to really think about what's on either side of it. And so one of our big concerns is also stormwater getting out. So in the long term, we will need to consider things like raising all of Cabrillo Boulevard, making that essentially what you're talking about, like a full tide gate system. But the term of this, or the goal of this project is really to get us through the next 30 years. But the idea being that in that time frame, we do need to prepare for sea level rise and make changes so that we can keep our beaches. But it's before we're anticipating large-scale flooding impacts that would require these very, very large investments. We're still keeping our eye on the long term. As part of our 2021 Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan, we did look at that long term, and then we're not forgetting it in all this. It's just that we're trying to focus on like these near-term investments. But I think bringing that up is really relevant to the longer term, because those are the type of things we need to be looking at in the longer term.
Thank you. Left field idea, so thanks for humoring me. And then looking at Shoreline, again, super excited about the bike path, but that will displace parking, and you suggest a parking garage there. You know, I generally think that'll materially impact the beauty of that area, kind of hiding those cliffs away. I think that's personally a big draw to the park. And then also, I know community spends a lot of time in that, according to this picture, the northwest lot, Sundays and Saturdays, it's closed off for kids for bicycling and just kind of a safe space in the road. So I just want to make sure that, that doesn't get glossed over and the community loses that safe roller disco place on Sunday nights. Yeah, that's questions I had. Thank you.
Okay,
Extremely
thank you.
thorough.
Thank you. Commissioner Clark.
Hey, that was an awesome presentation. Thank you so much. One of my questions was, how much does the California Coastal Commission determine what options are actually available to you? Like, before you do the draft plan, do you, for us to review and the city to review, do you go before the California Coastal Commission first to see what they have to say about it?
Honorable Chair and Commissioner Clark, thank you for the question. At the end of the day, we will need to do a local coastal program amendment as part of this project to permit all of these things, so that we will be going before them for that. They are funding this effort, and we are checking in with them regularly along the way. We just met with them yesterday, in fact, to run through these options. So we really view them as a partner going through this exercise. At the end of the day, everything we do will need to be permitted by the California Coastal Commission itself. So we're certainly factoring that in as part of the feasibility analysis, and the elements we'll be doing that technical analysis on this summer is to make sure the things we're proposing are feasible from a permitting standpoint.
Awesome. And then my only other comment was, one of your questions is missing objectives and priorities. And I'm assuming, even though it wasn't included in the presentation, because to make it totally comprehensive, it would be so long, that not harming current offshore natural environments would be one of the considerations in terms of fisheries and kelp beds with new headlands and groins. I was just thinking that maybe that should be included in there too.
Honorable Chair and Commissioner Clark, we can make sure that's included. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Ramsey, and then I'll move on to someone else.
Yeah, so sorry. I skipped this. The West Beach pipe, you said consolidate. Can you expand on that a bit?
Honorable Chair and Commissioner Ramsey. So the challenge is that before the harbor went in, there was no West Beach. And so the elevation of that beach was a lot lower, and there were a bunch of pipes that individually outfalled into the ocean. The challenge we have today is that those individual pipes are now below the surface level of West Beach. So you end up with this condition where those separate pipes all create their own individual pools until they get tall enough that they then connect together and create this kind of like massive water lagoon drainage basin type thing. So the idea is that we need to find some way to drain that water out to the ocean and not provide those pools that compact the sand.
Okay.
So an idea is, instead of having 4 separate connections out to the ocean, you connect them all together to one thing, and then that one thing connects to the ocean.
Okay, I thought you were specifically talking about the dredge pipe that runs the span of the beach currently. Is there any consideration for what happens to that?
Honorable Chair and Commissioner Ramsey, it's included into it. I will say it's complicated based on how that operates today, and that is an Army Corps function, and it's that pipe gets administered through their contracting and funding and budgeting and management. That's something that comes up regularly as part of our outreach and something we're trying to include in this effort as much as we can, but we have less control over it relative to other things based on how that dynamic works today.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, waterfronts are incredibly complicated. So I got a couple questions. One is it's kind of similar to what I think Commissioner Clark was talking about. And one of the things, anytime you read about waterfront projects, seems to always be some kind of unintended consequence, frequently environmental. So looking at some of your core options, particular things like raising the bike paths and the walkways and moving facilities, are there unintended consequences that you're already factoring in? What are they, I guess, and how do you manage that going forward?
Honorable Chair, thank you for the question. I think the 2 primary challenges that we need to ensure we address with the elevated walking and biking paths specifically, the first one Ms. Hetrick mentioned, which is if you're raising something, you need to figure out how stormwater from rain from behind drains out. So that's the first thing we're considering. The second is the location of where that raised structure ends up matters from the sake of, does it cause beach erosion in front of it?
Yeah.
So anytime you have a hard structure where there are waves actively hitting it, what happens is that wave energy hits it, bounces down, and can erode soft areas around it, including the beach. So there's a question of how far inland you do that to make sure that this structure isn't eroding the beach in front of it, which would be counterproductive to our whole idea of preserving the sandy beach. So that's one of the key questions we're trying to solve right now, is figuring out, with this strategy, last line of defense, how do we site it in the right location to make sure we don't have that unintended consequence?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Another question, you're talking about some of the facilities, things like parking garages on the SBCC lot and things like that. So in terms of your ability to execute, is this all, would you all be accessing city property, or is there, would you have private property or non-city property access issues to implement these programs?
Honorable Chair, thank you for the question. Right now, we are looking at public property. I think we could explore that more, though, if that's the desire of the commission. The City College parking lots, the city owns the land under, and then we have a joint use agreement with Santa Barbara City College. They are a stakeholder we have not pulled into the fold yet, but we will be doing shortly. Obviously, they are a key player in all of this, and we want to do everything in partnership with our partners.
Yeah. I mean, really what I was thinking is you want to be on public property absolutely as much as you can be, so
Yes.
you're not getting into that conversation unless it's absolutely necessary.
Well, and that's one of the things that's really unique about our waterfront and this project in general, is that our key focus area is entirely publicly owned and managed. So unlike many shorelines along the coast, we're not lined with private single-family homes along our waterfront, which gives us so many more options to address these challenges we're facing than other areas along the California
Yeah.
coast.
And then my final one might not be very popular, and it's under the heading, are the options headed in the right direction? And this kind of gets into a bang for the buck question, or maybe even a throwing good money after bad question. And I'm thinking about East Beach and the criteria or priority to maintain sandy beach at East Beach for as long as possible. When you look at the maps that you're presenting, it's ultimately a lost cause. At least that's the way I look at the map. And I'm being a bit, extreme in my language. But the question I would have then, if you're thinking about what will be the prioritization of what will be limited funds, I mean, because that's just real life, do you actually spend a significant amount of money trying to preserve something that can't be preserved, or is the money better spent really enhancing the experiences where you can get a long-term gain? And it's really just kind of it's almost a philosophical question, but it is definitely one I had when I went through the report.
Honorable Chair, thank you for that. It's a valid question. It's on the front of our minds too, and I'm not sure we have the ultimate answer to that yet. Ultimately, we will need some sort of vertical protective measure there to prevent the inland areas from flooding. So regardless of the strategy of beach preservation or not there, we're still going to need to make significant infrastructure improvements there to protect our inland East Beach neighborhoods. Looks like Ms. Hetrick has something to add.
Chair McGill, I would say this brings up something I think that addresses number 4 key questions you have. It sounds like one of the key questions you would have moving forward is how long will the beach last if we move it forward? If it's 50 years, that's 50 years of people enjoying the beach and the associated costs. So weighing those. And so I think that brings up a really good comment of what needs to be evaluated in order to make those decisions. Because
And I'm also thinking of it a prioritization. Do you preserve East Beach for, I don't know, 50 years, or do you do something really awesome with West Beach that will last much longer than 50 years? That's really the kind of question I'm asking.
ROI and opportunity cost.
Yeah. All right, Commissioner Nielsen,
Yeah,
and
but
then Aldana.
I also thought it was a wonderful report. Thank you for coming back and sharing with us so recently. And so I'll give you a handful of feedback and then a handful of questions. I'm very much a fan of the connectivity that you show in the bike and pedestrian paths. Please keep that as a strong goal for this. Specifically, I think we have an opportunity to kind of deconflict cyclists and pedestrians along the waterfront. We see a lot of people walking on the bike path and bikers on the sidewalk, and that can be remedied through the course of this project. So all the pictures you showed that show 3 lanes, 2 for cyclists and 1 for pedestrians, I thought was astute of you guys. And continuing it through, connecting our broken network there. I'm also very much a fan of the direction that Ledbetter looks like it's heading. I would trade off the parking lot, every time for the green space and the open space and the recreation, because there's so much other parking in the area. And I hope that, the next 50, 100 years means not more asphalt, but more transit and people recreating. So I think that's the right strategic direction to head. So I think Ledbetter is looking really good, in my opinion. And when you show West Beach compared to Ledbetter, it feels like Ledbetter could be much more like West Beach if there wasn't a lot of parking lot space. Taking that up and you do the trade-off between beach, grass, and the pavement. And I think I hold the opposite opinion of you, Chair McGill, that I see a problem with Cabrillo as it stands now, being 5 to 6 lanes for cars and the speeds we see travel there. And I think it would be a net benefit to have the beach and the green space encroach on the street and make Cabrillo feel much more like Shoreline Drive up by Shoreline Park. I think Chase Palm Park suffers because of the amount of cars and the speeds, and it doesn't feel safe to bring your kids, which is why I think that there's a fence there, is to keep kids from running into that street, whereas you don't feel like you need that at Shoreline. And so I'm a fan of a long time period with the right funding for us to move in that direction and not view Cabrillo as some immovable object for us that we can never touch. I think that the Public Works Department has goals that are in line with traffic calming and Vision Zero that we're seeing implemented on Cliff Drive and Milpas and other things that we should proactively work with them on that. And I think that that's most of my feedback. And I think Commissioner Ramsey answered or asked the question about the dredge pipe. I was wondering, though, if you guys are assuming that that would go under the raised walkway and exist as subterranean infrastructure.
Honorable Chair, thank you for the question, Commissioner, and all of those comments. Those are all awesome and things we can ensure to continue to study and look forward towards. That has come up, and that's something we can answer in this next project phase, that question of, is there a way to put the pipe in an elevated walking and biking path so that it doesn't impact our users the portion of the year when we're not doing the dredging. We can definitely look into solutions that do that.
Great, thanks. And if you could flip back to slide 31 for me. There was that image there with the number 3 in the top right that just shows cyclists and no pedestrians in there. Is the intent that you would have you just maintain the walking access for pedestrians elsewhere, or that's just meant to be a representative image of a theme and not a specific plan?
Thank you for the question. The goal is absolutely what you highlighted initially, which is to provide safe and separated space for all of our users. So if this conflates things wrong, the goal is if that's the bike path there like it is today, there'd be the safe sidewalk next to it for just pedestrians to walk. We want to decouple the users, as you've mentioned, for all the reasons you've mentioned, as part of any improvements to the bikeway.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and Commissioner Aldana.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. As far as the seawalls, where would you start and where would you end, and how high do you think they would be?
Honorable Chair, Commissioner, thank you for the question. In terms of a true seawall, we're not really exploring that option inherently right now. We're looking at, the thing that's closest to that is the rock revetment in front of the entire harbor commercial area. So that's represented on this graphic here. I guess you can't see my mouse, but it's more or less that bottom L finger in front of that would be a new hard structure. Separate from that, it's really on that elevated walking and biking path that would have some hard elements to it, with the intention of it being generally covered with sand and vegetation and park-like features.
Okay, so where would your raised walking and biking space be?
Essentially the entire project area. Everywhere you see the walking and biking path, as were proposed through the core measures, would be elevated above grade.
So Commissioner Aldana, the required height of the path or structure to protect from flooding really differs quite a bit across the waterfront, and really a lot of it depends on how close to the ocean you're siting it. And so, for instance, in front of the harbor commercial area, it will need to be much higher to provide the protection of the harbor commercial area than it will need to be, say, in the harbor main lot, where we don't see as much wave action and risks. And so part of the next phase is looking what are those exact heights that are needed, and our goal would be to try to minimize the heights to the extent feasible while balancing protection. We can always raise these features, but they will impact views and experience of the area. So we want to make sure that we incorporate public access across them and that they're designed in such a way that doesn't impact views and things like that.
Got it. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe from the harbor all the way to Butterfly Beach, there's a current bike lane. Is that correct? And with that said, as you raise the walkway, would it just be a walkway, being that there's already a bike lane?
Honorable Chair and Commissioner, thank you for the question. There's some form of bike network along much of the waterfront, including that connects to Butterfly. I think as part of this effort, we're still figuring out the true nitty-gritty specifics, but the goal is to ensure that we have safe space to walk and bike throughout the entire waterfront and address those known issues, including the conflicts today that we experience along the bike path at East Beach, where there's not separate space to walk close to the ocean, as well as the missing portion of that network in the Harbor West and Ledbetter parking lot areas.
Okay. And would let's just say between State and Milpas, which is approximately a mile, like a boardwalk, would that make any sense?
Honorable Chair and Commissioner, sure it could. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's components of doing the elevated walking and biking path that could be designed in that essence. There's an approach where we grade it very at low angles. There's a version of it where it's closer and feels more like a boardwalk. There's a terraced version of it. We're looking at those different types of permutations. If you have a preference or a recommended approach, certainly happy to explore it further.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And last question, at the harbor, in the parking lot, the drainage, where does it drain to?
Honorable Chair and Commissioner, it drains to the ocean ideally. There's a couple different pipes and systems in the harbor commercial area that could be tweaked. And so the quick win measures in the previous slide are things that we need to do regardless of any of these hazard issues based on how these systems are designed and the grading of the parking lots. But the idea being really with that orange bend is that it would then drain into the harbor marina area itself.
So it makes sense to divert it, correct? You don't want it to go into the ocean because it's already high tide.
Honorable Chair and Commissioner, ultimately we do want it to drain in the ocean because it needs to drain somewhere off the land. There's enough delta for a while that we're not concerned about the volume of water draining from the harbor commercial area itself into the marina.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Clark?
Just quickly in response to some of the comments about increasing parking and two-story parking garages, I agree. I don't like parking lots, and I do like green space, but not everybody can bicycle to the beach, and not everybody can walk to the beach, but everybody has a right to enjoy our waterfront, so.
Yeah,
it.
that may be one of those trade-offs. If you put a small parking garage and get more grass and sand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I heard the word boardwalk just now, and yeah, people go places for boardwalks.
All right. I have one quick last question based on your response to one of Commissioner Aldana's questions. When you're talking about the gradient the raised bike, in particular, the raised walking pathway, and you talk about the elevation needs to, it'll be different in different parts of the waterfront, which implies a gradient. Is it your intent to, or I guess I would recommend it to be your intent to make sure that it's ADA compliant and that, yeah.
Honorable Chair, every improvement we do as part of this project will be ADA compliant.
Okay,
We're
that's-
primarily, it's less of an issue going along the length of our project area. The consideration, I mean, is primarily perpendicular to our shoreline, and that is ensuring that, for instance, if you do this Ledbetter paradigm here, that there's a safe and easy way for people to walk from where they parked to the beach itself.
Yeah, I see. Okay, thank you. All right, that was a bunch of questions, which I think is, I mean, it's great. It just shows that everybody's really engaged in this process, and it's how important that it is to the city to really think this through thoroughly. And also, I think it's a testimony to the work that you're doing and how, basically the thoroughness of the presentations that you're giving us. So I really appreciate that. I don't have any speaker slips. I assume there's no one online. Yeah. So I think with that, unless anybody has, okay, one more and then we're going to close it.
One quick one. As far as any other coastal town, has there been any success stories with similar problems?
Good question.
Sure, yeah. Ventura actually did a similar project by their fairgrounds, by Surface Point. They moved back the parking that was there and had moved back the bike path. Down south in San Diego, there's several jurisdictions that have lost sand on their beaches. So Oceanside is one of those, and they're currently looking at what's called the Re-Beach project, which is essentially 2 headlands and an offshore reef to try to get more sand on their property. There's a number of projects out there. I would say they're all around where we are at as far as looking toward the future. There's several in naval properties on Navy bases. Obviously, those are right on the ocean, and so experiencing sea level rise much more. And so we have a few to draw from, for sure. But I would say what's unique about ours is that it's a heavier wave environment than, say, some like the Dutch projects and other Navy-based projects that we have to consider. I would say we are ahead of the curve in general, and which has benefited us, especially for funding availability. In addition, and this gets at something that Ms. Clark brought up, but we really are at the point where we are having trouble permitting things at our waterfront because we don't have a concrete solution to hazards in the time frame that some assets are being put in, so in like the 50 to 100 year time frame. And so it really is almost required at this point in order to permit something new at the waterfront to be able to show how we're going to phase and reduce risks over time. And so all the jurisdictions are preparing for this, and it's now a requirement of the state, but we are ahead of the game.
All right, thank you. Okay, I think that takes us out. When will we see you again?
Honorable Chair, you'll see us again in the early portion of 27 when we have a draft plan.
Okay, great, thanks. We will look forward to it.
And then we also have upcoming community meetings that will be in late April. I think the 29th and 30th, I believe, are what we're shooting for.
And you would recommend people go to your website to get
Yes,
the
please.
details on that?
I would love if folks are able to go to the website and sign up for the newsletter list, and you'll get an email from me in about 2 weeks or 3 weeks when we release the survey and announce the details of the open houses.
Okay, great. All right, and with that, I think.
Just, can you go back to where you had your contact information?
Oh, yeah, if we just put the contact information up, that's great.
There you go.
All right. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. All right, that takes us to Douglas. And we need Monique.
Chair
Have
McGill,
some
members of
speakers,
the
let's write.
commission, we have Monique O'Connor, who's our open space planner, to present this item, as well as Mark Fontillo from the fire department, in case you have questions about the defensible space work and our partnership with the fire department.
All right, Chair McGill and Commissioners, happy to be here with you all this evening to present on the management plan for the Douglas Family Preserve. So how did we get to the preserve that we know today? There is a rich history of use prior to becoming the Douglas Family Preserve on the site. In the mid-1900s, the site was used for oil exploration, melon cultivation, and orchards. The Wilcox Nursery operated on site from 1955 to 1973. Following the nursery's closure, developers proposed multiple projects, including a hotel, a residential subdivision, a care facility, and a private residence. The community did not want to lose this lovely open space and organized and advocated for open space preservation. And after more than 2 decades of effort, it paid off. The property was purchased by the Trust for Public Land in 1996, transferred to the city in 1997. And soon thereafter, it was named the Douglas Family Preserve in recognition of one of the largest private donors, Michael Douglas. So today, DFP serves an estimated 40,000 visitors annually. It's the city's most popular open space, and it's known for its ocean views and allowed off-leash dog use in designated areas. Since its designation as a city park, open space management activities have included vegetation management and invasive species control, trail maintenance, small-scale habitat restoration projects, installation of the water bowl, and general maintenance of trash cans, mutt-mitt stations, signage, ranger visits, and things that keep the preserve functioning in its day-to-day use. Over the past 3 years, the department has implemented several major projects. In 2023, we undertook a huge effort to remove invasive acacia throughout the 70-acre preserve. CAL FIRE was a big help to this. The site was flagged for what to protect and what to remove, and the CAL FIRE crew that helped us implement received an environmental awareness training before starting work. I have just a few photos to share with you all showing that work in action. That is an example of an acacia stand within Douglas Family Preserve. The acacia is that yellow flowering big tree shrub thing there in the background. And I particularly like this photo. It shows a space where one of those really large acacia stands was cleared. What you can see the CAL FIRE crew doing there is digging out the main root structure from that acacia stand. And the method we took was to dig down at least 6 inches, dig out as much of the root structure as we could, and bury it to prevent resprouting as best we could without using herbicide. And what all those blue arrows are pointing to are young oak saplings that were getting strangled out by this stand of acacia and now have a chance to hopefully establish in its place. Second big project is the Wildfire Resiliency Project. This project is spread across 24 open spaces across the city and receives significant funding from both Coastal Conservancy and CAL FIRE, totaling about $4.5 million. There are 5 priorities for this project. Those are defensible space, fire access roads and fuel breaks, vegetation management, fuel load reduction, and community outreach and education. So ahead of actually implementing things in our spaces included in that project, the first step was to have a biological resource assessment done. And this is a study that does a 100% coverage of our work areas, Douglas Family Preserve being one of them, and highlighting any of the sensitive environmental resources that we have on site or have potential to have. One of the sensitive resources we have to keep in mind is nesting birds. That's a common constraint for vegetation management work. The project work seasons were designed with this in mind. We have a short defensible space season that is actually coming up in a couple weeks here. That's focused on meeting fire safety requirements ahead of high fire season. Then, from October through January, we have our primary project season, which is a 4-month window for more intensive vegetation management outside of the nesting bird season. This slide shows you just some of the findings and data that we received from that biological resource assessment. We got a full vegetation map. We also have a full mapping of rare plants, a habitat suitability assessment for wildlife, and along with some other data. So, in addition to the biological resource assessment that really guides our work efforts, ahead of starting work out there, we held a community meeting. It was very well attended, project was pretty well received, and I think it was a really great opportunity to share our plans with the community and also opportunity for questions, comments, and feedback. Still, before work starts, we put together a site-specific work plan that is mostly Mark and myself taking in all the info we have received, going to site, and aligning our priorities for the work that we want to do out there, and of course, compliance with all of our regulating documents. The crew that comes to do the actual work before it starts also receives a worker environmental awareness training, so they're aware of our restrictions around on the site. And now we finally get to start the project. So I have a handful of photos showcasing the work that occurred out at Douglas Family Preserve, and we had a crew out there for about 3 months straight doing vegetation management work. This photo is kind of neat to showcase. Not only did the crew help with kind of traditional woody work, what you may picture a traditional fire fuels crew doing, but they also helped us with general preserve management, including hand pulling invasive species like castor bean, showed here. And we took every effort to reuse and repurpose any material generated from that wildfire resiliency work. Wood chips, everything was really repurposed and reused and placed strategically on site, with the exception of some of those noxious weeds and invasives that were removed that we didn't want to further propagate on site. Throughout this whole process, we are tracking our progress along the way to both report to our granting agencies and share with the community. So that figure on the left-hand side shows our completed work areas. That's everywhere this crew touched during that project work season in the Douglas Family Preserve, and we track that quite closely, again, both for the community and our granting agencies. So next project was the trail maintenance project. This was where general maintenance and tread work on all primary trails within the preserve was conducted. That includes the loop trail, the middle loop trail, our drivable route, which was actually re-established to pull that inland for about half of its area along the coast, and the Oak Grove Trail. This project aimed to reestablish drains with 2 low point focus areas. Those are the pink X's that you see in that figure there. Remove metal hazards, asphalt, and concrete throughout the site where appropriate that was there from prior use. Adjust trail alignments where needed, perform brushing as needed, focusing on removing poison oak adjacent to trails. And we did an attempt at decommissioning about 300 feet of trail around a standing dead snag to remain as wildlife habitat. So again, ahead of this major project effort, we had a second public meeting. This one included a public feedback sheet asking folks to mark up the map you saw on the previous slide, showing the trails they frequently use within the preserve, along with a couple other questions and space for additional comments. And again, some neat photos showcasing that project in action. So this is a concept that we implemented as part of this project. One of the main efforts, the realignment efforts, was to help narrow the bluff trail that gets the most use at Douglas and continually widens year after year after year by that increased use. So what we put in place were what we called islands or bulb outs, some folks call them, where we used a lot of natural material to gently weave that bluff trail. And the goal is to both reduce dust that often kicks up with the winds that blow through there, that kind of catches some of it. Also prevent that further widening in the years to come. And these islands are spots that we hope to engage in active restoration in the coming few years. That left-hand photo shows us decommissioning that 300-foot section of trail around a standing dead snag that was really nice wildlife habitat, was being used as a granary and an active raptor perch. On the right-hand side, you see some of those metal hazards that were removed from the site from its previous uses. That is what those islands or bulb outs ended up looking like. And again, we do plan to put some native plants in there to further establish them and set them in. And that was all material generated from our wildfire resiliency project. We knew that this trail project was following closely behind, so we strategically saved some of that for this kind of use. And here are just a couple neat photos showing some resulting trails. I do want to point out that we did not line every trail throughout the preserve. We really just did that along new bypasses and places that were kind of new areas that we wanted the public to really get the picture. This is where we'd like you to walk, but we did keep the natural feel and integrity throughout much of the preserve. All right, on to public engagement, and this is the main reason you are getting this presentation today. We have had a lot of recent concerns raised about dog safety related to the presence and management of foxtails. And foxtails, Hordeum marinum, which is the specific species we have at Douglas Family Preserve, is a widespread non-native across the state. Non-natives show up in areas of disturbance, i.e. human alteration or use. From a land management perspective, it's not common or best practice to try to manage widespread annual invasives ahead of planned restoration, simply because it takes a lot of resources for little ecological gain. This is why we've prioritized managing woody and perennial invasive species at DFP. Other concerns that have been raised by the public at those various public meetings or by phone call, email, etc., are bluff edge safety, erosion, enforcement of quiet zones near the homes, seeding availability, preservation of natural character, wildlife habitat, dust, and poison oak. So, what can be done? Where are we? To the public, we very much hear your concerns and of course are always looking for ways to improve our practices and improve our open spaces. We welcome the feedback and ideas that have been sent to us, and I can personally say it's really cool to see how much the community cares about Douglas Family Preserve. It's a very involved community and showcases just how special that place is. The reality, though, is that foxtails cannot be fully eradicated from DFP, and it's not because of a lack of know-how or because we simply don't want to. There's a lot of thought and effort that goes into the management of the preserve, which I hope has shown through in the previous slides. As land managers, we have to somewhat triage our priorities to balance the preserve's ecological integrity while supporting its many uses. And a preserve is managed differently than a developed park or a designated dog park. Choosing to visit means deciding between a managed contained space like Mackenzie Park Dog Park or a preserve setting where dogs may be off leash with those management differences in mind. So, what can be done? The upcoming slides are going to show you efforts that Parks and Rec will be taking within DFP, but we'd also like to share measures that community members can take to meet us halfway. So, a few of those are avoiding high-risk areas. Our trails do receive regular maintenance. Stick to those and put your dog on a leash if you worry about them running into off-trail areas with tall, dry grass. Perform daily inspections of your dog, particularly the ears, nose, mouth, armpits, and particularly between their toes. Regular grooming and trimming the hair around the paw pads and ears. Consider using protective gear. We see these often out at Douglas, like the Outfox Field Guard pictured here, or dog boots. All right, so to kick off our efforts on the Parks and Rec side, we recently scheduled Channel Islands Restoration to do an annual invasive removal event. Channel Islands treated approximately 20 acres of the 70-acre preserve and focused their efforts along primary trails, specifically removing foxtails. They conducted weed whipping, mowing, and hand pulling primarily of foxtails, but also of other annual non-natives throughout the preserve, and patches of foxtails that had mature seed heads were raked and disposed of off-site. So again, a few pictures highlighting that work and the tools used. Few more, you can see mowing, weed whipping in action, and I'd really like to point out this photo on the right-hand side. That is a long trailer that was filled to the brim with foxtail clippings, so they were indeed raked and collected as best as possible for off-site disposal. So, short-term plans in the next 2 years. The department plans to continue and expand vegetation management. We also plan to pursue active restoration within the preserve, hold additional public meetings, engage in additional volunteer events and programs, start planning for long-term public access improvements, and hire additional staffing to support the above efforts. These two photos on the right-hand side, I did want to highlight. These are of a recent active restoration site at Parma Park, which I know Chair McGill, you visited, and I believe also Commissioner Clark, a handful of you others may have been out there. This was installed about 3 years ago, and I did want to showcase the efforts that are taken ahead of active restoration. That lower photo shows what the site looks like when it was prepped right ahead of plant installation. This was a non-native grassland, similar to the non-native grassland areas that we have in patches throughout Douglas Family Preserve. And ahead of planting that site, we really took the site prep seriously. We aimed to knock back those non-native annuals and also aimed to suppress that existing seed bank. And then plants were installed, and we actively managed that through their establishment period, which is normally 2 to 3 years, with the hopes of, after that establishment period, they're able to outcompete those annual invasives on their own. And that site, I'm happy to say, has been very successful and is actually about to close out next month. Long-term plans, 2028 and beyond. We'd like to explore putting in an ADA accessible pathway into the preserve, looking into a bluff retreat strategy, maintaining and expanding restoration efforts, and strengthening our partnerships with nonprofits, granting agencies, and the community. So how is this all going to get paid for? The park receives maintenance support by the park endowment, grant funding, and the Parks and Rec annual operating budget. The park endowment recently awarded $150,000 in funding to support part-time dedicated staff and contracted support for vegetation management, trail work, and native habitat restoration. Park's highest priorities include wildfire resilience, public engagement, volunteerism, and habitat restoration. Again, Douglas Family Preserve also receives funding through grants. Primarily, that is around the wildfire resiliency project that we highlighted from Coastal Conservancy and CAL FIRE. We have significant funding from those granting agencies, but it is shared across 24 open spaces throughout the city, Douglas just being one of those. And also the Parks and Rec annual operating budget. And the Mesa Neighborhood Association has voiced interest in providing financial and volunteer support. Ahead of this meeting, it's been offered to the Mesa Neighborhood Association to set up a volunteer service agreement with the department to further efforts around foxtail management, and looks like we can move this forward pretty soon. Seems like there's some interest for that. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions.
Before we go to questions, do you want to talk a little bit about park versus Parks and Rec, or wait for questions? I can comment at any point.
Chair McGill and members of the commission, many of you, I think all of you know that the Park Foundation is a separate 501c3 grant-making foundation. It holds funds in an endowment for projects and activities and maintenance at the Douglas Family Preserve. Over the years, we've requested funds for a variety of activities. In fact, with the exception of the CAL FIRE work, a lot of DFP funds were used for trail maintenance. We've also used it for tree maintenance, We have used preserve endowment funds for restoration. It's very depending on the use. We recently went to the foundation board, which is something staff's been working on since late fall, with a request to really build on what's happened in the last couple of years, but, acknowledging the city itself does not have the general fund dollars to move things forward. This gives us an opportunity to have additional staff. We have one open space planner, and as Ms. O'Connor just mentioned, we have 24 open spaces. And although we work with a team, and we also work closely with the fire department, we don't have the bandwidth to do all of this work in every place. In fact, even restoration is rather expensive. So we've asked for funds that would carry us over a 2-year period that would fall in with the work plan, and the board voted to support the city in that effort.
Yeah. And I guess as a member of the park board, what we voted on was this plan that's been presented. And I think in terms of the level of support, we obviously recognize the need for vegetation management, and I'm very encouraged by the possibility of volunteer support for that element of it. I'd say pretty unanimously, correct me if I'm wrong, we believe that as a long-term city asset, the funds should be directed as much as possible towards kind of more holistic, long-term solutions. So, for example, choking out non-natives with natives is something that, as a park board, we would strongly support. The trail enhancement work we strongly support, and just recognize it as just a really important city asset that deserves a long-term approach. And I think with that, I should probably turn it over to questions from, unless you want to have something else either of you want to add, just turn it over to, who was first? Me. Okay, thanks. I can never remember the order. Commissioner Clark.
I really respect the work you're doing out there. I think you're definitely on the right track with eliminating foxtails by incorporating native vegetation, like let the native vegetation take back the land. At the same time, I am the proud owner of a $296 foxtail as of last week. That was not garnered at DFP. It was somewhere in my backyard and found its way to my cat's third eyelid. But so I understand the danger. Could you speak to the timing, like when you start more intensive restoration, how you did really good diligent site prep at Parma Park? When you get to that part in the cycle again at the DFP, will you be considering the foxtail life cycle in calendaring that work?
Yes, Chair Miguel and Commissioner Clark, happy to speak to that. So site prep really starts about a year out from active restoration, normally in the same timeline where we place an order for plants for seeds to be collected and germinated is when we start prepping the site. And that involves a larger scale effort of removing those non-natives and also working to kick back that established seed bank. Efforts often include putting thick layers of mulch to kind of almost solarize the soil while not removing all the nutrients from it. So that's still in a good state for those new plants to come in, but it does significantly reduce the germination of that existing seed bank of those annual non-natives. So those kinds of efforts would start about a year out from active restoration. And according to our work plan, we're hoping to get that plant order in the coming year. So those you'll be seeing those soon. And in terms of the timeline, the germination timeline of foxtails themselves, yes, it is a management strategy to knock them back before they go to seed. But it's very unpredictable. Kind of like Mr. Slack alluded to, nature is hard to predict, and it changes every year based on the rain year we have, when that rain comes, and how the seed bank has evolved in the last few years. So each year is very variable. And it can be difficult to have things aligned and ready to go immediately after a rain. And there's also other constraints, such as nesting birds, such as access to the site, such as use of the site. So with the resources that we have, we do try to handle that well. But again, going back to, it hasn't been a priority of the preserve in years past to actively manage foxtails past the fire safety requirements ahead of the high fire season.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Nielsen.
On that last comment, you said it hasn't been a priority in years past. Does the presentation today imply that it is now a priority to actively manage it beyond the fire hazard?
Chair Miguel and Commissioner Nielsen, yes and no. And Director Joe Zachary, please chime in if I miss anything here. We do hear the community's concerns, and we are willing to, do some extra effort out there, like the effort with Channel Islands restoration. We're willing to do a little bit more active management out there, and part of that too is increasing our staffing to be able to track that rain, track the growth, track when the seed heads are coming up, and engage a contractor at the right time to be able to hit it in that really key 3 to 4 week window before those seed heads mature. That additional staffing and funding will help us do that, but I don't think it will be quite to the level that maybe the community might be asking for.
I'm going to jump in with the follow-up. And is that then where you would see the focus of volunteer efforts is coming in to help kind of close that gap?
Yes, Chair Miguel and Commissioners, that is the hope, that putting together this volunteer service agreement, we can arrange for certain activities to be conducted by volunteers without Parks and Rec staff present, without management of a contractor, things that take a lot of staff time. We hope that we can do kind of a front load of effort to get this volunteer service agreement in a good spot. And then those folks that have that special interest in foxtails would be permitted to do certain activities to help manage them on their own.
Okay, thank you.
Director Zachary, I think, has
Yeah.
something.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, I think the challenge is foxtails are everywhere. They're in people's front yards, they're in parkways. We also encounter as humans foxtails probably on occasion. And this is an open space. And entering this open space, particularly one that allows dogs off leash, and most of it, our signage does indicate you're entering at your own risk. We also, at the same time, when we think of our open spaces and which ones are where we think, focusing more effort is of value, this park is one of them. And we've been talking about it for years. Our challenge is funding and staffing. And to be honest, the funding part is not just mowing and raking. To really do active restoration, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. That said, I think we spent $350,000 at Parma Park for 4 acres. This is a 70-acre park, which of course we wouldn't do that kind of work throughout the park. Because the city secured the CAL FIRE grant, we've been able to do more work in a number of our open spaces. The goal is that we're creating more resilient open spaces from a fire standpoint, and then hopefully helping us lead into more resilient from a plant life standpoint. So in the case of this park, we don't have additional funding to do restoration. Would we be looking for it from other sources like we have? Absolutely. By doing this initial work in the next 2 years, we hope we will position ourselves that if there is funding that comes available, we'll be competitive and can move forward with that. We don't have enough money in the endowment. The endowment also makes money, and when you spend money, you make less money. So part of the challenge for the board in their discussion last week is like, how we need to have a healthy balance to make money, to then be able to spend money. So it's like looking at that. So hopefully that helps answer. As far as the volunteer service agreement concept is as we have had requests to be volunteers. Most of it's focused around foxtails. Some of it is focused around trail maintenance and or restoration. It's figuring out what that looks like so that it's workable for the city, but also for the volunteers. And I think we'll have defensible space work starting here April 6th. So in that case, there could be an opportunity to couple that work effort with a volunteer, and that's what we intend to see if we can help make happen.
Thank you. Did you have another question?
Yeah, so for clarification, the Park Foundation is a privately run 501c3. The Parks Department doesn't, they're highly aligned with what you guys want to set out, but you guys don't have direct control over it. That's something that funds have to be allocated for you. Last month's comments from the community was about use of those funds for this purpose, and you guys apply for grants to address this, but it's not within your control whether you can do that, correct?
Correct. Chair McGill and Commissioner Nielsen, that is the case. The city works very closely with the Park Foundation. The Park Foundation receives and holds funds from private parties in support of parks and recreation programs, so that if anyone else wanted to donate, for example, to preserve management, they could donate to the Park Foundation. The Park Foundation Board makes the decisions on how funds are spent based on recommendations by city staff or when we have a joint program or initiative that we're doing. The concerts at the Bandshell and Plaza Del Mar are a prime example of that, where the park board and the city collaborate on moving an initiative forward. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
Thank you, Director Zachary. And then, so we received some written public comments that talk about the timing of weed whacking and mowing, specifically using the terms, avoid late season and target early season. And I think what I understood is that there's, depending on the weather, there's a very short window for where that is true. And there's not like a early or late designation for this. It's keep an eye on it and do it when it's necessary. Is that an accurate interpretation of what you were describing?
Yes, Chair McGill and Commissioner Nielsen, that is accurate. It changes from year to year, and some years one, early management event may be enough to kick back the sprouting, but on a really good rain year, it could resprout 3, 4, 5 times from that same seed bank. So yes, I think your understanding is correct.
Thank you for elaborating. And then the other theme in the comments that we received last month and then this month's in written is about making sure that we bag and haul off, and you highlighted the picture that showed that was done with the trailer. Would you say that we're doing that to the extent possible, and that last year and last season, the late season whacking and the residual bagging that we didn't catch was an anomaly? Or what's your take on why are we receiving these public comments, at this point in time compared to recent activity in the last season or two?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Nielsen, that's a very good question. It is, I think, of point to point out that when we did have that second public meeting, foxtails actually did not come up in any of the received written public comments or questions at that public meeting, really. I think some recent vet bills probably have prompted a lot of this movement, and also just a really good rain year. We're seeing more foxtails. That could be part of it as well. Was there another part to your question? I apologize.
I think that's.
That was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate I think you guys did great work with DFP over recent seasons. That's been wonderful, a lot of great improvements. And I do think that using the eucalyptus stumps and branches to line the trails gives a visual barrier for dogs getting into the foxtails to begin with. I think that's a good practice to continue.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Ramsey, and then Aldana.
Yeah, I'll be concise. Thank you, Monique, for the report. You said Channel Island invasive was out already this year. Do you have a specific date for when they did the clearing?
Yes, Channel Islands restoration, if I remember correctly, they began the first week of February.
Okay, so.
And
early.
I think they were out there for a handful of days throughout February.
Okay.
Maybe mid-February, but within the last 2 months, they were
Great.
out there, yes.
And then you said this would be an annual event. And then when we're talking about the restoration, it's going to take 3-ish years to get there. are we thinking 5 years annual event that we're going to have to go through and clean? Or how long in the future do we expect to have to do this process?
Chair Miguel and Commissioner Ramsey, well, it will be an ongoing effort. And again, going back to the reality check, we will never successfully
Yeah.
eradicate foxtails from Douglas Family Preserve, particularly with the amount of use that space gets. Even if we were successful in completely eliminating that seed bank from the preserve, with the amount of visitors, it would be back with shoes and fur within 2 years.
Yeah, so it sounds like
And-
we're trying to boil the ocean here and just, a problem we can't technically solve. So I'm just curious, what's our second best option if we were to deploy these funds elsewhere? Like, could we get a bench out of it, or is there something comparable compared to just, trying to fix this non-resolving issue?
So, Chair Miguel, Commissioner Ramsey, if I could jump in. We cannot guarantee that we will mow DFP 5 times a year forever. It's not possible. We don't have the funding. We have 24 open spaces.
I didn't mean 5 times a year. I meant once for the next 5 years. Once a
We
year.
do that
Yeah.
already
Yeah,
as
yeah.
part, so the city is committed to meeting the wildfire resiliency requirements of our community wildfire protection plan. And Mr. Vontillo can speak ad nauseum about that because he leads that effort on behalf of the fire department. So that will always happen.
Okay.
I think the concern that was raised last year, which was the first time it was ever raised in my time with the department, which is a few years, is the foxtails and the concern. And so last year, I think a number of people volunteered to rake. We say, okay, let's build on that. Particularly, let's try to improve our timing to minimize non-natives that have set seed. And 2, if we have volunteer support, that will make it easier for us to do it more than once,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. With the Park Foundation Board was not interested in spending all of its money on weeding and mowing and
Yeah,
raking.
I get that. I'll
So,
redact my comment.
But we
It's
talked
fine.
about, hey, let's look at, is there one more pass that maybe Park would support?
Mm-hmm.
And then we look at other ways that we can try to get things done. So we're trying to balance all
Yeah.
these things without saying, this is the exact prescription we will implement over the next 5 years.
Great, thank you. That's all. Sorry
All
to
right.
muck things up.
And Commissioner Aldana.
When the the foxtail waste gets hauled away, where does it get disposed?
That is a great question, Chair Miguel and Commissioner Aldana. Normally it is directed, we ask our contractors to direct it to general waste instead of green waste, so that it doesn't end up at the county's mulch station, because it does hold all of those invasive seeds. However, once it leaves our site, we ask that, but sometimes it's hard to regulate where contractors take that waste. Yeah, that is an ask throughout the county, that invasive seed do not go into green waste, and we do implement that practice with our wildfire resiliency efforts. When we cut and bag seed heads or dispose of some invasive plant material, it goes into general waste instead of green waste to abide by that.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. I think we've pretty well taken through the guts of the issues. I do have 4 speaker slips for public comment, and I'm going to go through them in the order that I have them. And I think based on who's done speaker slips, I think you all know the process. So you'll come up and you will have 2 minutes, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. And we're going to start, Mr. Marshall, Jim Marshall. I will say as he comes up to the podium that I actually met with Jim Marshall and Paul Stern and Anna Stern a couple, 3 weeks ago now, and we talked through some of these issues. All right.
Thank you. My name is Jim Marshall. I'm Chair of the Friends of Douglas Family Preserve and a board member of the Mesa Neighborhood Association. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging Parks and Rec for advancing the 2026-27 management strategy for Douglas. And that, along with the earlier start to vegetation management this year, represents meaningful progress and shows that community concerns are being heard. I'm going to change my words here based on what I just heard from Monique. And we are very much in favor of the vegetation management and the active restoration. The restoration that was done in 2006, I believe. If you walk the bluffs now, you see it, and there was some great work done, and I look forward to seeing what we can do in the future. And also, I'm very, very excited about us being able to organize our volunteers going forward. But when it comes to foxtails, they're always going to be with us. They're not going away. We know that. We're not trying to make them go away. We would like to stop making it worse. And when we're making it worse, the policies that are making it worse right now are when there's any weed whipping and mowing and the clippings are left behind, the seeds are being spread. And last year, June 4th, when the weed whipping was done, the trails were blanketed with dangerous seed heads that made it immediately more dangerous for the dogs. So we know they're not going away ever completely, but we can stop making it worse. And when Channel Islands did pick up after themselves, that was good, but they didn't do it everywhere. So if that's going to be part of the planning going forward, we welcome that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. And I think that message has been heard, yes. All right. Second speaker I have is Richard Giegel. Giegel? Giegel.
Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you guys. I had a prepared statement, but just with this information and watching all this, I'll shoot from the cuff. And I can clarify that the first day that Channel Islands was on site at Douglas was February 25th. And that's the mowing. Maybe they were there doing preliminary scouting. I took photos of the first evidence of foxtails on January 16th, so 5-6 weeks. You know, I think none of us would be here today if we were given the opportunity to raise funds for mowing and capturing with a private contractor in a most responsible way and with collaboration with Parks and Rec. We would fund it. I mean, I have 3 dogs. I've spent probably $5,000 in the last 5 years on foxtails. They love the preserve. I love the preserve. It's a sense of community. We all jeopardize our dogs by going there. We understand that. We understand it's an open space. It's not a manicured park. And a friend of mine just had she has a little elderly dog, and she took it to the vet. It was being treated for a tooth abscess, and after a week on antibiotics, a foxtail poked through her jowl and was surgically extracted after that. So I just think that we're all rational here. We all want a really safe environment, a good environment. We want to better the preserve. We want to be volunteers. We want to be donors. We don't expect the city to pay for our agenda here, but we would like to be heard and have the opportunity to further this along without meeting resistance at every turn. Honestly, we're just trying the best we can.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. I think there's a huge opportunity here. I mean, we've got, I know, and I'm going to, before I go to the start, one thing I would say in terms of if volunteer funding was directed to the Park Foundation, it can be specific what it's for. I mean, this is just a general comment, so I would think that, I think we're hearing a welcoming of volunteerism, a welcoming of funding for invasive species, annual early management. If an organization would choose to donate to the Park Foundation, that organization can be very specific about what that money is to be used for. That's all I'm trying to say. You wouldn't put it in thinking you're going to get foxtail treatment and then have us turn around and fund a band shell concert. All right, with that, I'm going to move to Paul Stern.
I am the president of the SB Mesa Neighborhood Association, and I can assure you that if this issue was not brought up at one of these public meetings, it wasn't because it wasn't an issue in the community. There were people last year that or 2 or 3 years ago, put up signs saying everybody should pull a foxtail every time they walk their dog. That's the only way we're going to protect the dogs from this issue. And we know that you can't get rid of foxtails, but we know you can suppress them and mitigate them and make the danger less. And especially for visitors, these foxtails are a big problem. I've seen many visitors from other places, not even the community, with dogs that are sneezing, and they've said to me, my dog's allergic to this bark. I said, no, your dog has a foxtail. You have to get to the vet right now. Through this experience, I would like to make a suggestion to the commission. It's very hard for a neighborhood association to talk to you guys in that nobody's really allocated to our neighborhood, right? There are 6 of you up there. There's 6 people on the council. Our council person is in the 2nd district, right? And Mike Jordan. If one of you were allocated to us in 93109 so that you could get our community's feedback, we'd appreciate it. I also think there should be an endowment for every park in the city if possible. And I also think it should be clear that the community needs to be able to talk directly to you about what our priorities are, because when we have to go through the Parks Department, our priorities get lost. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move to Anna Stern before. No. I have a slip for Anna Stern.
Hi, thank you for giving me the opportunity, I'm slightly short.
I get it.
The opportunity to speak, and I want to thank you for all the community events you have had. I've seen both of you at all the ones. We're kind of newcomers. We came about 5 years ago, literally moved 2 blocks away from the park. When we walked through the park one day during our son's graduation weekend from UC Santa Barbara, said, oh, it's a leash-free park. Maybe we should retire here. And we then said to him, hey, if you see a house in this neighborhood, let us know. And we literally bought a house 5 months later from New York City. We had no idea where we were going to retire. So this park is like central to our life. One of the things I want to point out, I appreciated the breakdown of who visits the park. I want to add 75% of the people have dogs. So when you look at those numbers, I'm there every day. I almost want to say it's 90%, but I'll go to 75%. You see an occasional jogger. And then the other thing I want to say is reinforce the timeliness of all the cutting. And we are here to support you, though some of us get very emotional about the whole thing. We represent dozens and dozens of other dog walkers who are all week. It's like, are you going to the meeting? Who's going to the meeting? Make sure you go to the meeting. There are dozens and dozens of dog walkers who we represent. And a lot of people can't come at 4 o'clock to a meeting. So, think of this room filled with dogs and dog walkers and owners, and this is who is worrying about this problem. So we appreciate anything we can do to help everyone here. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, do we have anybody online?
There's no one online.
Okay, thanks very much. All right, I'm not sure, I think we're pretty well there. Do you have any closing remarks? I'm hearing you.
I have one comment. I heard from the community that they feel that they're met by resistance when approaching our department, and I'm very sorry if that is the feel that you have, and that's not our intention. I think just a lot of these concerns come and ask us to respond very quickly. And I think perhaps some of the frustration comes when we are not responding as quickly as the community would like to see. The city and being the agency that it is doesn't move that quickly, and with all the regulation we have to go through. And also, again, as Jill pointed out, we have a small team. It's really, I'm the only open space planner, and we have a lot of concerns and a lot of spaces to address, and we very much hear them, but often can't respond on a moment's notice, but do intend to take these concerns forward.
I'm going to get you a second. I guess I'm going to build on that a little bit, since I've been working with, many of the parks and many of the open areas for many years now. I've been here a long time. These are not uni-function assets, and they're city assets. And I think it's really important to remember that these are city assets for everybody in the city, and that particularly the open areas, they aren't from one thing. Yes, I'm in Douglas all the time, and yes, there's lots and lots of dogs, and it's a really treasured space, but it's also a native plant sanctuary. It is a raptor habitat. There are joggers. There are yes, lots of woodpeckers, and one or two gophers. But and I think it's for all of our open areas. I think there is actually a very holistic approach that needs to be taken with a limited staff, with a limited budget. And I think one of the things that a community like Santa Barbara has going for it is it actually cares enough to try its damnedest to maintain 24 open areas. And keep it as in the spirit of a native habitat that also allows for non-programmed recreation. And I just think that's really important for everybody to be cognizant of. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Nielsen, or Commissioner Nielsen.
Thank you. There was a comment talking about the pull a foxtail as you go, and I was wondering if there has been any recipes in the past that we've used to kind of crowdsource the ad hoc volunteerism to suppress these on trail edges that gives a permission structure for residents to take an active hand without crossing any lines that endangers the species, the preserve, so on and so forth. That can be done by the community throughout every given week.
Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, that is a question that would be very difficult to answer, because in any park area, and we have 64, some of them are much higher managed because they serve millions of people every year, and they're in developed spaces. Giving carte blanche to people to go into a natural preserve to do what they want is not something we would promote. People are there all the time without the city being there, and so there are things that do happen in our parks that we would rather they didn't. So we really do need to be thinking about managing the public space for the public, and also managing the space within a reasonable understanding of the resources at hand. So our focus when we work with volunteers, for example, and we have a cadre of volunteers at the AC Postel Rose Garden, which is in Mission Historical Park, and also at Alice Keck Park Memorial Garden, is to focus that work effort on specific tasks and spend the time as staff to get that volunteer core moving forward. In the location of Alice, we actually always have staff there because of that type of location. The Rose Garden, we have volunteers that are trained enough that they can go in and help us prune roses on their own. The idea behind perhaps something at the Douglas Family Preserve is that we have a very detailed prescription of what we would support, what tools could be used, where that work would occur, and training associated with it, rather than just doing a free-for-all. Would it be great if there would be 100 volunteers there one day? Absolutely. And they would be sustained even more so. Not sure that's realistic, but it's certainly worth a try.
Yeah, and I think furthermore, maybe just anyone, anytime, anywhere, if the Parks Department could evaluate the possibility of a certification program similar to others where you can ordain people who've gone through a training program to do that appropriately might be a method to do so.
Commissioner McGill, Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, that is possible, but we also do not have a volunteer coordinator. So when we are doing those things, it's an additional task for the staff that implement that. If we had that dedicated position, it would be a lot easier, but we have never successfully been able to secure it and hold it in place. So there's a balance there, right? Because, as I said, we manage 64 different parks, the city's urban forest, we run recreation programs and services. There's a lot that goes on that not a lot of people really get because they just want to go enjoy the space that's there for the public. So we're balancing multiple objectives all the time.
Thank you,
But-
Director Zachary. I appreciate that you guys, have a lot to juggle.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's just a build. Part of the job description of the part-time support that would come in is to enable the volunteerism.
And then last two things that I don't think you have to necessarily comment on here, but just take under advisement. I wonder if the high fire warning model of the high foxtail warning that can change on the season, just to highlight that, you've heard this before.
Everywhere in the city,
Because foxtails seem to sprout up and be seasonal with rain. If there's any type of way that we could make the signage and the warning more visible when it becomes more of a risk immediately on a recurring basis as you enter the park, it sounds like something that's not a new idea, though.
Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, we are actually talking about putting more warning signs so everybody entering the preserve understands the risks because it's not a pristine environment. We do have on our signage the risk of anyone entering the preserve with a dog off leash because they encounter other dogs off leash. And sometimes that doesn't go as well as people would like it to. We do also work with the health department, environmental health, because at times there are poisonous mushrooms that could crop up in the Douglas Family Preserve. And that's posted as well. So we are looking at a better way to post year-round and more succinctly, and hopefully people will look at the signs and do more outreach, because we certainly can do more of that.
Yeah, and I think that the point I'm trying to make is that the static warnings sometimes just become, background noise, and something that's more direct, focused, and active for a target was the suggestion there. And then lastly, if there's a chance to partner with the Park Foundation to maybe support some type of program for the guards for the dogs, that is something that the Mesa Neighborhood Association and the Park Foundation could figure out together, but then the DFP could support, a drop box for those types of things. Thank you.
Okay, and then Commissioner Clark, and I think we're going to wrap it.
You're thinking like the bike bells. Yeah.
Yeah, the Elings,
You
yeah.
can borrow a bike bell on our local trails and return it when you're done. I just want real quick to respond to Mr. Stern's comment about wanting to talk to us anytime. Anytime you send an email, we will get it and we'll read it and we'll take it seriously. And then additionally, you can come to any commission meeting and speak on an item that's not on the agenda that day. And you can have 2 minutes. If you need more time, you can have your wife come and have 4 minutes, or friends and have 6 minutes. That being said, it's difficult for us to talk on a one-on-one basis sometimes, because if you talked on a one-on-one basis to Commissioner Ramsey and then to me and then to Kathy, and then we didn't, and then we took the information that we got from you and we talked together, we could be violating the Brown Act. Like, no more than a quorum of people can talk about a subject that might at some point in the future be on our agenda. It's very complicated, but we're all very cognizant of not violating this act that protects the public from things that happen behind closed doors. So that's another thing to consider. So usually emails and coming here for public comment are great.
We get it all.
Yeah, we do get it all and read it.
All right. I think with that, we're going to give it a wrap. Thank you very much.
I'll explain after.
Really appreciate it. And yeah, that's it. Thank you. And with that,
Was something,
no, we're not done. I didn't say we were done.
I don't have plans tonight.
I didn't say we were done. I said we were done with this. So the final agenda item is the director's report. Ed.
Chair McGill, Commissioners, you've had quite an interesting meeting between Waterfront Adaptation and management of the Douglas Family Preserve. Now, I'm going to talk about what we have been doing as a whole department. Every year, we have an Arbor Week celebration. We go to council with a proclamation. We get engaged with schools in tree planting. Our forestry staff do that. And we use the opportunity to really talk about the value of the urban forest to the community as it relates to making it a more livable place, as trees can offset climate change, and also to recognize Santa Barbara Beautiful, who has every year provides funding for the purchase of the trees, the new street trees that we might put in on city streets, and that enables us to do that. You may have seen the media around this stone pine planting. Santa Barbara Beautiful did fund the purchase of the 40 trees that were grown out, specifically contract grown for Anapamu Street, and those were planted too in conjunction with Arbor Week. We also every year host an egg hunt. It's moved around in different city parks. It's been at the golf club for, I think, maybe 5 years. It is part of Corsco's agreement to hold community events at the golf course. They do movie nights in the summertime. So the egg hunt this year is this Saturday, and it's from 2 to 4 p.m. If you want to come very early or park somewhere else and walk to the golf course, because it gets really crazy and busy. But we also have the police department and the fire department that come out. It's like a nice little community event. I think here on the other side of your page, we actually have age ranges, which helps control the bedlam. So if you have a child that's 0 to 2 in age, they get to go first, followed by 3 to 5-year-olds, and then 6 to 12-year-olds at 3:30. We are encouraging people to RSVP because then we can sort of manage what's happening. I think there are families that go from egg hunt to egg hunt for extravaganza, but that's okay because it's fun for kids. It's a nice event. You did have a report from the Youth Council last month, so I won't steal their thunder and when they come back next month, but your staff report talks about their Youth Speak Out and the success of it. And then we've just had a presentation about the Douglas Family Preserve. We are about to kick off our seasonal defensible space work. I really do want to acknowledge and recognize that without the CAL FIRE grant that we have, it would be difficult to do the extent of resiliency work that we're doing. We're in year 3, I think, of a 4-year grant agreement, and already looking at how we can continue to supplement this work and get more grant funds. But it's a $4 million project. The city would not be able to do it without these grant funds. And our partnership with the fire department is really a great one. We've made great strides in working together and coming up with joint strategies for wildfire resiliency. If you want to go see sheep, they will be at Parma Park, Laurel Canyon, Franceschi, and Hale Park. If you want the schedule, Monique is your source. So they also do different strategies depending on what's determined the need is. And that will go through mid-June. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
And Commissioner Nielsen.
Of course. I witnessed this wonderful arborist tree competition a couple years ago. I think it rotates what city it's in. Does that coincide with Arbor Week or Earth Day? Is that just a coincidence? That was a wonderful event to get to spectate.
Yeah. Chair McGill, Commissioner Nielsen, I don't know the answer to that. I don't believe it does. I think when I observed it one year, it might have been in the fall, and it does move around. I mean, the association that puts it on is always looking for different spaces, and so it doesn't always happen in Santa Barbara. But I can find out if there's something scheduled. It's not something that I've heard about yet.
Thanks, yeah, and I would encourage them coming back. It was a fun day. As far as the extravaganza goes, I was searching for it proactively, and I found it on the golf website on their event calendar eventually, but it was surprisingly hard to find. A bunch of other past year's events and times came up that made it kind of confusing. So I think the only note here is that it's a wonderful event, but it might be a little bit hidden for first comers who didn't already participate in past years. So I appreciate you making the announcement and having in the director's report for this. It's a great timing because it'll be on people's radar for this weekend. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, I believe that is the end of the agenda, and we can adjourn. See you all next month.